Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America Audio, with your host, Tim Binnall.
Hello there, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with another edition of Binnall of America Audio, Season 2. It is May 5th, 2007. Happy Cinco de Mayo, my friends. This week, our guest is Internet conspiracy pundit Kent Daniel Bentkowski of the Controversy Papers. Kent has appeared on numerous esoteric radio programs in the past few months, and I've become quite a fan of his work, so I want to get him on the program to pick his brain a little bit about some of the material that you can find at his fantastic blog that deals in all sorts of conspiracy theories. This interview was a pretty long conversation, about 2 hours, and in light of some scheduling situations we have here at the BOA headquarters, we've split it up into 2 parts, and given the content, it actually works out really well, and you'll see why in a couple weeks when the full interview's been posted. This week, we're going to dive into the first installment of the 2-hour interview, part 1 of 2. Here's what we're going to be talking about: how Kent Daniel Bentkowski got involved in conspiracy theory research in the first place. It's quite an interesting background. He's going to tell us all about it. The origins of the controversy name and why he calls his work research journalism. He's also going to tell us about Hilary Clinton and the 2008 presidential election, his theories on why she's preordained to be president and what that means for the other candidates. We're also going to talk about the microchip agenda and how that leads to the global agenda. We're going to talk about both those big picture conspiracy theories. We're going to discuss false flag terror attacks, what some of the clues are for false flag terror attacks, and why they may be carried out in the first place. Plus, of course, tons and tons more. All of those topics have a myriad of side tangents. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Kent Daniel Bentkowski, let me give you a little bit of background on him. Kent Daniel Bentkowski is a research journalist from Buffalo, New York. He's been a published author since 1985, when he sold his first article for $20. Since then, he has been writing and working as a journalist and researcher nearly full-time. He also has the ability to see the bigger picture, and as such, he has felt obligated to add his voice to those calling out from within the darkness that surrounds this planet. His website is controversypapers.blogspot.com, KentroversyPapers.blogspot.com. Without any further ado, let's rock and roll. This interview was recorded on March 16th, 2007. Kent Daniel Bentkowski, part 1 of 2, talking about the Controversy Papers on Binnall of America Audio, Season 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Binnall of America Audio. My guest this week is a very prolific blogger, and he is the man behind controversypapers.net. He has done a tremendous amount of research into all sorts of conspiracies, and that's what we're going to be discussing here on the program this week. He's making a lot of waves in the esoteric world. A lot of people are talking about him nowadays. Seems like he's really breaking through, and I'm excited to have him here on the program. Kent Daniel Bentkowski, the man behind Controversy Papers. Welcome to the program, Kent.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I most especially appreciate the opportunity to speak with your listeners.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure they're excited about the episode. Let's just get going here on your bio and your background and how you got interested and involved in this conspiracy research.
Yeah, how I got started in this is I actually have a family member, a cousin who married a man who's involved in the Illuminati and is personally involved with both the Bush crime family and the Rockefellers and the Rothschild family as well. And once I saw that happen, along with my personal experience of working on election campaigns of my then Congressman Jack Kemp, who in 1988 had run for president on the Republican ticket, and also who was a former Buffalo Bill quarterback. And it was eye-opening in the respect that when I went in to begin working with Congressman Kemp in his re-election campaigns, I thought that the political process was on the up and up, and what I learned working on his campaigns was that it was anything but on the up and up.
And then how did you go from just doing the research and being like a personal researcher and your own personal journey to the controversypapers.net and being more proactive with your research and making it available for everybody out there on the internet?
This is actually a two-part answer. First of all, my personal nickname given to me by my best friend is Controversy. And this is because we oftentimes have political discussions that are of a very controversial nature. We talk about all sorts of different underlying agendas and themes and conspiracies and so forth. And about 8 years ago, we were having one of these discussions at my home, and my best friend Robert had looked up at me and said at one point, "Oh, you're always trying to start a controversy." I started laughing, and I also realized at that point that that was a perfect way to describe me, because everything that I was looking into in terms of research was controversial, so to speak. And the second part of that question is that about 3 years ago, I came to the realization that if I remained silent about the things that I had learned since my research began back in 1980, that what would happen is that I would become an accessory after the fact in real crimes that were being committed by the global elite under the names of America and the American citizenry. And once I came to that realization, I decided to put a website together, and on June 17th, 2005, the Controversy Papers went online at controversypapers.net. And ever since that point, it's been no looking back ever since.
Part of what you do at Controversy Papers is what you call research journalism. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the term research journalism is and what you do as a research journalist?
Yes, research journalism is how I describe what I do. And typically a journalist covers the daily news, things that happened yesterday, things that are happening today, and things that will happen tomorrow. And very often this is matters of that won't last long. They will expire pretty quickly. And so what I decided to do is to, instead of being a reporter of the daily events, so to speak, that what I would do is focus on research and do longer research-based reports that are of a timeless nature, that are going to still be as valuable next year as they were on the day that I published the paper.
Yeah. What's your overarching goals here with the Controversy Papers? As you said, you sort of alluded to that you felt like you needed to do it to clear your conscience in a way, or to not be a part of the overall system of criminal activity, if you will. But what's the overall arching goals of the Controversy Papers outside of that personal thing?
Well, there are actually two goals. The first is educating the public about some of the deeper issues related to the subjects that I write about. And the second of this is that I hope to, at some point, foster some sort of change in our world.
And as you alluded to also, that your cousin was married into this Illuminati family and all that wild stuff. Talk about your unique relationship to the subjects you research and this strange connection you have, sort of.
Yeah, in 1986, my cousin had married a man who is a part of the Illuminati. They're extremely wealthy, and in fact, this gentleman owns a business here in Buffalo that last fiscal year had done $1.5 billion in sales, and they control 22 subsidiaries. This is in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And in terms of this, when I was still in contact with this part of my family, I was hearing things at that point about future plans of who would be president, and most especially why Jack Kemp would not be president in 1988 at the point he was trying to run for the Republican nomination. I was told in 1988 also that George Bush Jr. would be president one day. This was way before he had done anything in the public eye that was of a national exposure. This was before he was governor of Texas. This was before he had the Texas Rangers baseball team. And it was quite shocking for me to hear this at that point, because I still believed that the political process was on the up and up.
Yeah.
And my experience here showed me that it was anything but.
And have you, since you went online with the Controversy Papers and started exposing your research into the Illuminati, have you had any sort of feedback from this part of your family that is involved in the Illuminati? You sort of alluded that you aren't involved with them anymore, but has there been any reaction at all?
Well, actually, Tim, I do not have any contact with this part of my family at this point. But knowing how the Illuminati does operate, I am quite sure that they are aware of this. Although personally, I have not received any feedback regarding this. No phone calls, no visits, no lawsuits or anything like that.
Like you said, you've been doing this research for 27 years, a very long time. Before we dive into the Controversy Papers, let's talk about some of your influences and the people who have guided your research over the years.
The people that have had the biggest impact on my personal research and also on my life in general are obviously truth tellers. And this is something, truth and honesty is something that's extremely important to me. In fact, one of the early Controversy Papers that I did publish was a paper related to my moral code, and it explained exactly what I believe in terms of that moral code. And the people that have had the biggest influence on me are people like David Icke, who has put forth some incredibly accurate information for the most part, and information that I was able to fact check and confirm was accurate. At this point in time, I'm very influenced and very interested in the work of Michael Tsarian. He is an individual that I have interviewed personally, and had recently put that interview up on the Controversy Papers. Michael is a very fascinating individual and very captivating to talk to. And his book on Atlantis is incredibly interesting. And he also last year put out a 22 DVD box set.
Oh, wow.
Which covers 6 different subject matters. And this as well is just fascinating information.
Now, let's dive into some of these Controversy special reports that can be found at controversypapers.net. And this is a lot there, and before we did the interview, as I was preparing for the interview, I sort of cherry-picked the ones that I want to talk about, and the audience should know that there's just tons more on there that are worthy of inspection and investigation by the listeners, but these are sort of the ones that I picked to talk about. And the first one I want to talk to you about is Hillary Clinton's hidden agenda of manipulation, which is about the Hillary Clinton 2008 presidential run. First, talk a little bit about what gravitated you towards choosing this as a topic.
Okay. When I saw the Monica Lewinsky scandal happen, I realized, based on the research that I had done up to that point, that there was a big possibility that there was an underlying agenda to that situation, because it accomplished two different things. It denigrated the office of president in the eyes and the minds of the American public, and also what it did is it propped up Hillary Clinton and her image in terms of a quote-unquote wife who would tolerate almost anything and who would persevere under incredible odds.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happened, I realized that there was a very big potential for something big to be in Hillary's future. And I'm talking something bigger than just her becoming the senator of New York State, where I live here. So what happened at that point is, going back to just after 9/11, I started putting together a dossier on Hillary Clinton, and I was focusing on news articles and other bits of information that were related to her presidential potential, so to speak. And so what I did is, in 2002, for instance, there is a screenshot in this report, Hillary Clinton's Hidden Agenda of Manipulation, a screenshot of a message board posting that I had done in September of 2002, where I actually described Hillary Clinton as the future first woman president of the USA. This was way before she was even talking about running. This was at a point in time where she was interested in New York State senatorial matters, and this was a representation of how I was able to see things in a bigger picture context.
Mm-hmm.
So once I saw her announcement in January of this year that she was going to be running and holding all these different televised town hall meetings and so forth, that she was going to be manipulated, if you will, simply because in my area here, she's completely hated by almost everybody. And I've talked to many people across the country where I've found this to be true across the board. So the only way that she could get elected, being so unlikable, is for the situation to be manipulated. And lo and behold, on January 27th, 2007, there was a televised C-SPAN town hall meeting in Des Moines, Iowa, where they used this technique called the Delphi technique, which is a way of manipulating an audience to arrive at a predetermined, mindset, I guess you could say. Thank you. And this is where the participants in the audience are handpicked. The questions that are asked of the candidate are handpicked. And in terms of that, watching this on C-SPAN and then later going through the transcript, this is exactly what they did, is they completely manipulated this. She did not receive any negative questions whatsoever, which is what I suspected would happen anyway.
And now, to sort of play devil's advocate a little bit, and also because I'm just generally cynical, wouldn't this manipulation of the town hall meetings be practiced by all candidates? I would presume that sort of funny business is part and parcel with the political process. Are you saying that it's more with Hillary Clinton, or that she's the only one doing it, or just that maybe she's the best at it?
In this current election cycle, I see this as being very necessary for her to end up in the White House. Earlier this in 2006, in the summer of 2006, Hilary Clinton was the guest of honor at that year's Bilderberg Group conference. This is the same treatment that her husband received in the year before he announced his presidential run, where he served 2 terms, just like I believe she will. And this is something that all candidates do, but you have to understand that going from George Washington, our very first president, all the way forward to George Bush Jr., the 43rd president, we have had this situation where the winner in every single election, with no exceptions whatsoever, is the individual with the closest ties to royalty. So these candidates who end up becoming president are people who are selected, not elected.
And so do you think that these other candidates that we're hearing a lot about now, do you think all these other people are just sort of the noise and the distraction and everything else, and that the game's already over, that Hillary's definitely going to be president?
Yeah, my personal belief on this is that this is all designed to back up this assertion when we were children that we were told in school anybody could become president. And as I had just mentioned, according to a genealogy group called Burke's Peerage, every president that has ever been in this country is the individual with the most ties to royalty during that particular election. So these other candidates, such as Giuliani or McCain or Obama, these people are put into the process to make it look legitimate when it actually is anything but.
Do these candidates know that the jig is up before they even get involved in the race, or are they actually under the impression that they have a shot? Or does it depend on how deep they are into the pyramid of power, if you will?
I believe that it is the last thing that you had said.
Mm-hmm.
Not every single individual is going to be part of the inner circle, so to speak, so that there are individuals who are running who may not realize that this is underlying everything. In terms of people like Giuliani, for example, he absolutely is part of that inner crowd. A person like Obama, I personally believe, is put into the process to give credence to the idea that an African American could become president someday. When you look at the mindset of these global elite members, and you find that they're incredibly racist in their beliefs. And so I can't see that there would be, for instance, an African American president before there was a woman president. In addition, Tim, there have been a lot of television shows recently that have shown a woman as president. For example, currently in the Fox TV series Prison Break, there is a woman president who is very Hillary Clinton-esque in the series. So this is a part of the subliminal manipulation, the subliminal implanting and embedding of this idea into the viewers so that it is an acceptable thing once they go into that voting booth.
If they even need to vote, given the technology nowadays with electronic voting.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Before we move on to the next controversy paper that I wanted to discuss, you also allude in this Hillary Clinton piece, you also allude to a grooming process that's underway right now for George Bush's nephew. You'd know his name better than I would now. I'm drawing a blank on it, but he's being groomed to be the first Hispanic president of the United States or something like that you talk about in this Hillary Clinton piece. Can you talk a little bit about that? You'll be way ahead of the curve if it all goes down that way.
Yeah. Who we're talking about here is George P. Bush. This is Jeb's Hispanic son because he married a Hispanic woman. And what they're doing with this individual is as you had just mentioned, there is a grooming process that's going on where he has a very negative past, this young man. He's been arrested for many things that he had done while in college, which involved drinking and partying and abuse of women and so forth. So they're going to have to sanitize his biography to remove all of that negativity. And in addition to that, this grooming process is done through the media.
Yeah.
Where they are presented as being, future leaders and so forth. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if we go back all the way to 1980, when George Herbert Walker Bush, Sr., was the vice president, and we go all the way forward to Hilary being elected president, we see that the same crowd of either Clintons or Bushes who have recently come out in the media again as being buddy-buddy and closely tied to one another, we're going to find that that same crowd has controlled things for, at a minimum, 36 consecutive years in the White House.
Yeah. It's kind of scary when you think about it that way.
Yeah, and I'm assuming in making that statement that during the Reagan years, the person who was really running the presidency was Bush Sr. and not Ronald Reagan. It does appear that that was the actual case, that he was running things, and because Reagan supposedly was showing the first signs of Alzheimer's during his first term, as they say.
Okay, let's move to the next controversy special report that I wanted to discuss, and this one is on the microchip agenda, one that I find particularly fascinating because it seems like something you can definitely see coming down the pike. For starters, let's talk about what made you decide to tackle the microchip issue.
What happened, Tim, is that my 11-year-old dog died in the summer of 2006. And what happened is, after my dog Bear had passed away, my wife and myself and our son went down to the local ASPCA and adopted a second dog. And we were given a brochure which was talking about microchipping your pet. And this particular brochure had this quote inside of it. It said, quote, "If you are worried about loss or theft, you need more than just a name tag to identify your dog. Stop at your veterinarian on the way home from picking up your puppy and set your mind at ease with permanent identification like a microchip. You can also take this opportunity to obtain a general health review and set future appointments for immunization, which we will also discuss later in the brochure. If microchip service is available in your area, your puppy will be assigned an exclusive registration number and will be entered into a national registry. If he or she turns up at any shelter or vet, a quick scan will reveal the registry information and you will be called." When I read that paragraph, it chilled my blood, and I realized that at that moment upon reading those very words that this was a part of an agenda, which actually is a 5-point agenda, which ends up with every human being on this planet microchipped.
And you talk about that agenda in obviously in this, because it's titled the microchip agenda. You do talk about the agenda, and you sort of what you call gradualism, and what you're sort of talking about. Let me hit the sort of the pathway towards everybody being chipped, and then you can talk about it a little more. It's first the animals, then the criminals, then invalids, then children, and then everybody. Does that pretty much hit it?
Yes, that's correct.
Why don't you flesh that out for the audience and tell them more about this gradualism that's coming down the pike for the microchips?
Everything that the global elite does has to be done in a gradual, step-by-step process. And this is because many people would object to an announcement that would say, within 2 years, everybody on this planet is going to be microchipped. There would be many, many people who would be very upset at such a thing. So what they need to do is they need to go from, for instance, in this particular situation, they actually began with farm animals. Now, farm animals used to be branded with a hot iron, and they'd be branded with the insignia of the farm to which they belonged. And that did not prevent people from stealing animals at various farms across the country. Mm-hmm. This is well known, and especially well known to those of us who were farmers. Tim, for instance, I grew up on a farm, so I was well aware of this. Then it goes from the farm animals to the pets. Now, very many people are very upset if they lose their animal, and in terms of me personally, my dog Bear was a complete family member. He was very well loved and very admired by many of our family and friends for being such a wonderful being, and it upset me greatly when he passed. So they go from the pets, then they go to the criminals, because everyone in the population is not necessarily going to be too upset by criminals being microchipped.
Yeah.
They always start with the most detested individual or type of individual to gain the public's acceptance of these matters. So then they go from the criminals, and this is for both probation and parole that this will be used. Then they go to the, as you said, the invalids, and as I describe them, the Alzheimer's patients and the mentally impaired, because those people can oftentimes wander away and could fall into some serious harm if they weren't paying attention to where they were going. Mm-hmm. So obviously we need to protect them. Now, there's been such an issue with these quote-unquote missing children, so to speak, children who get kidnapped or who are needing protection in some way. So we accept that this, as it had already been done for the farm animals, the pets, the criminals, and the invalids, now we need to protect our children. And it's very important if they were kidnapped, for example, that we would be able to get them back.
Yeah.
And then we go from the children to the complete adult population of the country. By that point, there is so many of the previous groups have been accepted in the minds of the population that it's not too much of a jump to go from the children to the total adult population. if we went from the pets directly to everyone, that would not be acceptable.
Yeah.
But this gradualism path is acceptable, and that's why they do it.
Mm-hmm. And where do you think we are on this scale of gradualism? And if, I know you're not like a psychic or anything, but when do you think this whole thing is going to become so commonplace that people are just going to be chipped and it's not going to be a big deal? Where are we on that scale?
Well, actually, where we are now is in the past year or so, they have made the announcements about the criminals and the impaired, the invalids, and they are beginning to make the announcements and laying the groundwork, if you will, for the children.
Yeah.
Now, what they're doing with the adults, and this is very interesting, and people should pay attention to this with what I'm going to say next. Keep this in mind as you hear this as we go forward. How they're targeting the adult acceptance of this agenda is they're making it a fad for people to be microchipped. You can get into the club, your favorite nightclub, if you have a microchip. You can get not only into your favorite nightclub, but you can go into the VIP area if you are microchipped. And this had been an announcement made in an Italian nightclub where they were doing this in Europe. So we're probably about, I would say, 90% of the way there.
Oh, boy.
They want this to be taken care of before 2012 or thereabouts. And it's just a matter of how much resistance and how much protesting there's going to be along these lines. Just the other day, for instance, the chief executive officer of the Visa credit card company had said that we will most likely have a cashless society by the end of 2012.
Oh, wow. So
this is going to be the general time frame, I believe.
And you can kind of see this microchip thing unfolding in the proliferation of cell phones in the last 5 years. You can kind of see how overnight technology can infiltrate every aspect of someone's life.
Yes, that's correct. And we must remind people that brand new cell phones, every one of them has GPS coordination ability built within it, so we can be traced and tracked no matter where we are at. They can find out our location just based on that cell phone, and it doesn't even have to be on a certain phone call for this to be tracked. In fact, it can be tracked with the phone being turned off.
Obviously, there are a lot of technophiles out there that probably think this might be a good idea. And, of course, as you said, they're going to frame these different initiatives to get, invalids and criminals and children chipped they're going to couch these in good reasons why. But why don't you tell us why the microchip is a bad idea?
Well, it's a bad idea because one of the things that the companies that are making these chips, they are saying things like only the positive aspects of this, which, as I just explained, are the ability to find your pet if you lose it, or the ability to get your child back if they are kidnapped. And in the case of this situation, it's a bad idea because, for starters, these microchips have both transmitting and receiving capabilities, and they have the ability to alter your state of mind. They have the ability to alter your brain waves and other aspects of your homeostasis, which is the word that describes the overall body's systems. And in doing that, putting that chip into your arm, what's going to happen is you will not in any way, shape, or form be able to get out of that tracking system, because it will always be turned on. And this has also some danger for dissidents like myself, who they will target to alter the thought process of people like myself, and you too, Tim.
Oh, no. Well, I'm not going to be chipped, so.
Well, I'm not going to either.
We'll be living out in the boondocks somewhere,
yeah, you
growing
and
our
I
own
will
food.
Probably be sharing a cabin in the woods somewhere.
I don't know where to go from there. Let's tackle another one of your controversy special reports. There's a 4-part piece, and it's really fascinating and well done, and that's Anatomy of a False Flag Terror Attack. And I'm going to sort of go through each of the four parts with a little bit of a talking point here of what I would like you to talk about. So let's start with the first part of your piece, and which broke down the 17 points of note in a false flag terror attack. Obviously, don't go into all 17, but maybe hit the ones you think are most important when discussing a false flag terror attack and what people should look for if there's a terror attack. You know, what are the signs they should look for that might be a clue that this is not what it appears to be?
Okay. First of all, what a false flag attack is, to those listening who may not be aware of what the actual term relates to, is it relates to terrorist acts that appear to have been carried out by a certain group or a certain country, who are quickly named as being responsible for the attack, when in fact it is an entirely different group who carries out the attack, blaming the first group. A perfect example of this appears to be 9/11 itself. At this point in time, 84% of Americans, based on the most recent poll that had been done, do not believe the government's own conspiracy theory of what happened on 9/11. And that's because it's complete nonsense. Anybody who has a little bit of common sense or just a general level of intelligence can understand that paper passports do not survive flaming infernos and land in the street unharmed and so forth. So to get into the major aspects of what to look for when you have a false flag possibility and you're looking at it to see if it matches this particular definition, is that the attack, first and foremost, can be stated in terms of what is known as the Hegelian dialectic, which is now more commonly referred to as problem, reaction, solution. The most recent experience that we have had with this terrorist attack, false flag scenarios in this country, brought about the USA Patriot Act. So the globalist agenda in some way will be progressed by the event itself. Suspects are named almost immediately after the event, but it's never enough in advance as to actually prevent the attack from happening. The other thing is that the news media is complicit in this situation, because what they will do is replay videos of the attack on an endless basis, which is designed to psychologically terrorize the viewers in terms of a psychological operation or psyop.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after the attack, you'll find that there are always going to be some sort of a freedom-destroying law or bill that will be rushed through Congress, typically in the middle of the night or on a weekend or some other time of day that they will feel will not draw too much attention to this by the media. In terms of this also, we find that oftentimes you will find an announcement of terror drills or public safety drills have been supposedly being taken place at the time the real attack occurs. In the case of 9/11 again, there were 4 separate war games that were going on that particular day. Another thing that happens with false flag attacks is that eyewitness reports always vary greatly from the establishment version of the event that takes place.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, in the case of the London train bombings, there was a couple of eyewitnesses who talked about a situation being where the bomb was actually inside the train instead of underneath the train. And you'll find that in the case of the Oklahoma City bombing, for instance, the early news reports after Oklahoma City were talking about there being nuclear bombs in the building and that there were further bombs that needed to be removed. And by the time we hit the 6 o'clock news at that particular day, all of that was sanitized from the day's event, so to speak. So these are some of the typical things that you will find. Another interesting thing that always seems to occur is that surveillance cameras that are in the immediate area of where the attack takes place are either found to be mysteriously turned off, broken, or simply turned away from the action, so to speak. If anyone notices this and anyone makes comments about this in public, this is blamed on somebody pulling a prank or somebody damaging the equipment. And gee, it's a shame, that they damaged this equipment, because if they wouldn't have, we would have caught the perpetrators,
Yeah.
and all this stuff.
So we need more cameras.
Yes, exactly. And then the last thing that I want to mention, and this is interesting as well, is that as soon as possible after the attack, the entire site is locked down. There is no outside investigators. There are no outside verification. There is no truthful investigation that occurs, and all physical evidence is destroyed as soon as possible. And going back to 9/11, we find that perfectly good evidentiary materials, such as the beams, the steel beams that were holding up the towers, were shipped off to China, and no one was allowed to actually investigate or test scientifically the evidence before it was destroyed.
And as I said, there's just tons of points also in there that people should check out on controversypapers.net.
Just one last thing that I'll say about the false flag report with the 4 parts is that we find that investigation or some sort of like a commission will be appointed sometimes immediately after the attack. Like in the case of Pearl Harbor, for instance, which we know for a fact was a false flag attack. That commission investigation was begun 9 days after the attack itself. In the case of 9/11, it took them 441 days before a commission was appointed. In the JFK assassination, it took only a week for that to happen, as it did with the Challenger shuttle disaster. But in the case of 9/11, 441 days. And this makes the government look very bad.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why many people are pointing their fingers at the government directly, me being one of them.
You make note that these false flag terror attacks, especially in the last 20 years or so, have been used as a means for the global agenda. Let's talk a little bit about the global agenda, because obviously that's the big end game, I think, for the powers that be, if you will.
The global agenda is something that is actually a very interesting thing to look at, because what they're trying to do here is they're trying to implant into the minds of the population acceptance of these things. And in the case of what this agenda is they want a world bank, for instance, with a single currency, which will be cashless. It will be at first a credit card type of a process, and then later it will be moved over to the microchip implanted in individuals. The other thing that they want to do is they want to implant everybody in the country with, in the world with these microchips. They want a total surveillance, prison-based society, which is what America is at this point, and turning into very quickly. You find that they also desire a privatization of government military programs, with the same handful of companies getting the contracts over and over again, merging the government with the military-industrial complex. They also would like to depopulate the world. And we found people like CNN founder Ted Turner saying that an ideal population for the world would be 300 to 500 million people, as he stated in an interview with Audubon magazine. A single world currency and a world banking system, which is going to be based on the Federal Reserve model. We will also have destruction of individual national sovereignty, and a world community will be constructed, which will move the thought process of the individual from being a citizen of America to being a citizen of the world.
Yeah.
They also desire a world court, which would be a tribunal-based system where it will be closed off, just like the military tribunals are now, where it's not allowing a realistic or a legitimate defense from occurring. It will force people into secret testimony and other horrible aspects of things that we're seeing coming out of the military right now.
Yeah.
They also want to have a fascist-based military rule, which would be similar to like a United Nations type of army. And the reason that they need to do that, for instance, is an American service individual, an Army or a Marine member, is not going to want to shoot an American.
Yeah.
But if they bring in somebody from another country to do that, they will have a much easier time in taking out that dissident, let's say. We talked about the microchip population, and the ultimate realization of this is not just going to be a microchip in your arm, but they want actual brain implants. So they will actually be able to control your thoughts and how all of your body's systems can react and be manipulated by the frequencies that are being sent to and from these chips.
Oh, boy.
They also would like a global religion, which would be based on Luciferian doctrine and principles. And also, the very last aspect of this is they are also shooting for mental health screening of all citizens, beginning with children through public schools, which would be undertaken through the process of mind control programming for those who resist the New World Order.
Sounds pretty dark, Kent. Sounds pretty dark.
Yeah, it's something that, and again, Tim, these are the reasons why I put this website together, because this is so negative that this has to be advertised and passed to the people so that they do understand what's going on, so that we can have a chance to stop all this.
Yeah. Talk about this Luciferian influence, because it's come up a lot in the Illuminati and at the top of the pyramid. A lot of people seem to think that those people who really pull the strings are very dark and have a very dark side to them, and there's a lot of this Luciferian aspect that's discussed, not overtly as much as you'd think, and sort of as a backdrop, a lot of it comes up. So let's talk about that Luciferian aspect to the Illuminati.
In terms of this, this is only shared with people once they reach a certain level in the hierarchy. For instance, in Freemasonry, we don't see the Luciferian principles start coming out until you reach the higher degrees, which are way above what are called the Blue Lodge degrees of the first three of the 33 that are publicly known about, and then there are many, many more on top of that are not known to the public. And so once you start getting into these higher degrees, like the 30th, the 31st, and the 32nd degrees of the Scottish Rite, for instance, in Freemasonry, then you start to understand that the true force behind the power, so to speak, is Lucifer. And they believe Lucifer to be the good aspect who had been subverted by an evil God, and they actually refer to like God and Jesus Christ as being negative forces, and Lucifer being an angel of that must be revered, and so forth. And in terms of this, you see this in the mass media all over the place. One of the other reports that I had written about the occult and Kabbalistic symbolism in rock music, and you find this in the way bands record and present their material on albums and CDs, and how the bands dress up and how they do their performances in concert. So there's a big connection between bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, the Grateful Dead, for instance.
Yeah.
between those bands and occult principles. For instance, it was John Lennon who made sure that Aleister Crowley was put onto the cover of Sgt. Pepper of that album. And he had been the person in the Beatles who was actually studying magic and the magical principles and the doctrines put forth by Aleister Crowley. George Harrison is typically referred to as the religious Beatle, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He followed Eastern philosophy, and John Lennon was dealing with Crowley magic and other aspects of that Luciferian connection. So in terms of that, it's very interesting to look at these things. But it's a very negative type of thing over the long haul because it does have a high price in terms of how it affects people emotionally.
There you have it, folks. That does it for this week's edition of Binnall of America Audio. Big thanks to Kent Daniel Bentkowski for coming on the show. He'll be back, of course, next week with part 2 of 2. I'll preview that in a little bit. You can find out more information on Kent Daniel Bentkowski at controversypapers.blogspot.com, KentRoversyPapers.blogspot.com. Check it out for tons of fascinating conspiracy-related material. Moving right along now, it's time for Binnall of America Audio listener feedback, and this week we're going to break outside the box a little bit and respond to a post on the BOA Audio thread at Imaginative Worlds. I am a frequent poster there, and we have a thread at IW devoted to BOA Audio Season 2, and there's a lot of questions and comments that come in from the IW members who listen to BOA Audio, and we have a comment here from one of the members that I wanted to single out and discuss here in listener feedback. The Imaginative Worlds member is Topper, and here's what Topper has to say. I listened to the first half of Dr. Sala's interview. Tim, you need to relax and enjoy yourself. The average listener can hear your concentration over the airwaves. I heard or noticed that it took 45 minutes before you relaxed conducting this interview. One suggestion I have that might help, ask your guest what got them interested in the topic. What life-altering experience led them into the vast pit of paranormal research? That post is from Topper at Imaginative Worlds in the BOA Audio Season 2 thread. Thank you for taking the time to post in the thread, Topper. Thank you for the comments. There's actually more than meets the eye regarding what you may have noticed as my concentration that was emanating over the airwaves. During the Dr. Sala interview, his voice came across very quiet, and in fact, we had to actually increase the volume on the interview where Dr. Sala was talking because he was so quiet. We actually switched phones numerous times during the interview to try and get something louder coming from Dr. Sala, but it never seemed to take. And I think what you heard at the beginning of the interview was me trying to figure out how best to deal with this situation where I was worried that he wasn't going to come through clearly on the interview. He was going to come in too quiet. So in my mind, I'm going over the questions, of course, and what I'm going to talk to him about in the interview and what we're going to talk about next following what he's talking about. But also, I'm worrying about the sound quality of the interview. Unlike some of these other radio programs, I do not have an underling or even a helper here to manage the sound elements of the program. I have to do all that during the interview, and you only get one shot at these sort of things. I've had a couple of occasions where things have gone wrong and we've retaped small portions of interviews, but you don't want to have to stop the interview halfway through and say, wait a minute, you're not coming through clearly enough. So in essence, really, that was what you heard during the interview, and we've made adjustments to the process, and hopefully that won't happen again. Regarding the second point about asking the guest what got them interested in the topic, we almost always do that for every interview, but since we had Dr. Sala on BOA Audio twice already and covered his bio and background, I didn't ask him this time around, and in retrospect, I really probably should have, because there's a lot of people who haven't heard that interview and missed out on the bio background portion of a Dr. Salad interview. So we'll make it a policy from here on out to do the bio background, even if the guest has come back a second time around, for the new listeners who didn't hear it on the original interview. So there you go, smashing the fourth wall a little bit here at BOA Audio. As the show grows and evolves and gets bigger, and maybe we can bring in some people to give me a hand here with the technical aspects of the show, you'll hear less of me being concerned with that, and I can focus more on the actual hosting part of the show. But for now, it's a ragtag operation. Ride along with us. Don't worry. Things are only going to keep improving here at Binnall of America Audio. And thank you so much for listening, Topper, and thank you for posting in the BOA Audio Season 2 thread at imaginativeworlds.com. If you'd like to be a part of Binnall of America Audio listener feedback, there's two ways to do it. Actually, there's numerous ways to do it, as I just noted here from the listener feedback, but here are the two main ways to do it. Either go to binnallofamerica.com, click the contact button in the top right-hand corner of the screen. That will bring you to the contact page at BOA. Or write to boaaudio@hotmail.com, boaaudio@hotmail.com. Those are the two main ways to reach us for Binnall of America Audio listener feedback. Also, you can go to the message board, theusofe.com. That's the official BOA message board. Let me spell the URL, theusofe.com. That's the BOA message board. You can go there. There's a section there for BOA Audio with individual threads and discussions on each episode, and a thread for listener feedback. You can always go there and post your question or comment, or go to imaginativeworlds.com, where we have our own BOA section now, and you can pop in there and discuss the show with me there if you want. So, a myriad of ways for you to be a part of Binnall of America Audio listener feedback. Now, all you have to do is come up with a question, a comment, a suggestion, a guest suggestion, or whatever, and send it in to me, and your correspondence will be on the road to Binnall of America Audio listener feedback. Let's do it to it on the thanks. Big thanks to Leslie, Chiron, R. Lee, Joe V., Ralph Molesworth, and Tina Senna of binnallofamerica.com for your help and support with the audio series and the website. You got to check out the BOA staff columns at binnallofamerica.com. Just fantastic stuff. Tina Senna's material has been getting a ton of critical acclaim. Chiron's movie reviews are really catching on like wildfire, and we've been talking about the quickly rising Leslie and R. Lee, both of whom are now a part of UFO Magazine as well. The binnallofamerica.com staff is going places, and you can read a wealth of their material at BOA. If you're only listening to Binnall of America Audio, you're only getting half the story. Read the columns at binnallofamerica.com for even more underground esoterica. binnallofamerica.com, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. If you're a long-time Binnall of America Audio listener or an appreciative newcomer and you want to help support the audio series and the website, there's a simple way to do it. You go to binnallofamerica.com, you click the PayPal button, and you make a donation via PayPal. No donation is too small. All donations go towards offsetting the cost of the program and helps keep the show up and running and available to all our great listeners worldwide. So if you can make a donation, please do. It would be greatly appreciated. Next week on the program, Kent Daniel Bentkowski, Part 2 of 2. In this concluding installment, we're going to have an extended discussion on esoteric messages found in popular films like A Bug's Life, Breakfast Club, They Live, and many others. We're going to get KDB's take on esoteric television shows of note, the UFO phenomenon, and an interesting inside story on Timothy McVeigh. Of course, the requisite tons and tons more. It's a marriage of esoterica and pop culture in our concluding installment of our interview with Kent Daniel Bentkowski of the Controversy Papers. On that note, we wrap it up here for the week. Thank you very much for listening, folks. Until you hear from me next week, this is Tim Binnall, signing off.